The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight when Patricia Morgan first noticed him. She was wiping down the counter at Miller's Diner, the small 24-hour establishment where she'd worked the night shift for the past 2 years, when the door chimed and he walked in. Soaked to the bone, his worn jacket dripping water onto the checkered floor, the man looked like he'd been wandering the streets for hours. His face was weathered, lined with exhaustion, and his eyes held a hollow look that Patricia had seen too many times in this part of town. "Coffee, please," he said quietly, sliding onto a stool at the counter. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Patricia poured him a cup without hesitation, adding a little extra cream the way she did for customers who looked like they needed something warm inside them. "Rough night?" she asked gently, setting the cup before him. He nodded slowly, wrapping his hands around the mug as if drawing life from its warmth. "You could say that." She didn't push. In her line of work, Patricia had learned that sometimes people just needed a quiet place to exist for a while, no questions asked. At 42, she'd seen enough of life's hard edges to know when to speak, and when to simply offer silent compassion. Her own journey hadn't been easy, a divorce that had left her starting over, raising her teenage daughter Melissa alone, working double shifts to make ends meet. But she'd never lost her ability to see people, really see them, beyond their circumstances. The man, she'd later learn his name was Thomas, stayed for an hour that first night, nursing 2 cups of coffee and a slice of apple pie she'd insisted he take. He paid with exact change, counting out coins carefully, and left without much conversation. Patricia thought that would be the end of it, but the next night he returned, and the night after that. Within a week, Thomas had become a regular fixture during Patricia's shift, always arriving around midnight, always ordering the same thing, coffee and whatever pie was left from the day. He never said much, but Patricia noticed small things about him. The way his hands shook slightly when he lifted his cup, the worn wedding band he still wore on his left hand, turning it absently as he stared into his coffee. The careful way he handled money, as if every penny mattered because it did. "You don't have to keep feeding me pie," Thomas said one night, a hint of a smile touching his lips for the first time. Patricia shrugged, refilling his cup. "Kitchen closes at 11. If I don't serve it, it just goes to waste. Besides, you look like you could use it." "That obvious, huh?" His smile faded, replaced by that familiar exhaustion. "Only to someone who's been there," Patricia replied honestly. She'd learned long ago that pretending life wasn't hard didn't make it any easier. Bad times don't last forever, though. I know it doesn't feel that way, but they don't. Thomas looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. "You believe that?" "I have to," she said simply. "For my daughter, if nothing else. She's 16, thinks she knows everything about the world. I'm trying to show her that kindness matters, that people matter, even when everything feels impossible." Over the following weeks, their conversations deepened. Patricia learned that Thomas had been an accountant before losing his job 6 months ago. His wife had passed away 2 years prior, cancer, and he'd been barely holding things together since. The loss of his job had been the final blow, sending him spiraling into a depression he couldn't seem to climb out of. He'd lost his apartment, been staying in shelters when he could get a spot, sleeping rough when he couldn't. "I used to be someone," he told her one night, his voice thick with emotion. "I had a home, a career, a life. Now I'm the guy counting pennies for coffee at midnight." "You're still someone," Patricia said firmly. "You're still here. That counts for something." She started saving him portions of the evening meal, meatloaf, chicken, whatever the cook had made that day. She'd pack it up in to-go containers and slide them across the counter when her manager wasn't looking. Thomas protested at first, but Patricia was stubborn. "My daughter and I are doing fine," she insisted. "Let me help, please." Melissa noticed the change in her mother, the way she talked about the man from the diner, with a gentleness that went beyond professional courtesy. "You really care about him, don't you?" her daughter asked one morning over breakfast. "I care about people," Patricia replied. "That's not a crime." "I didn't say it was," Melissa said, studying her mother. "I think it's nice. Really nice." 2 months into their nightly encounters, Patricia arrived at work to find her manager, Harold, waiting for her with a serious expression. "We need to talk about your friend," he said, pulling her aside. Patricia's heart sank. "What about him?" "Other customers have complained. They say he makes them uncomfortable, that he smells bad, that we're running a diner, not a charity." Harold sighed, looking genuinely apologetic. I've got corporate breathing down my neck, Patricia. I can't have this becoming a problem. He's not causing any trouble, Patricia argued. He sits quietly, pays for what he orders. I know, and I've looked the other way because you're a good employee, and you've got a big heart, but I've got rules to follow. Harold paused, then softened slightly. Just be careful, okay? I don't want you getting too involved. You don't really know this guy. That conversation haunted Patricia for days. She knew Harold meant well, but it bothered her how quickly society decided who was worthy of compassion and who wasn't. Thomas had become more than just a customer to her. He'd become a reminder of how fragile life could be, how quickly circumstances could change. One particularly cold November night, Thomas didn't show up at his usual time. Patricia found herself watching the door, worry gnawing at her. Midnight passed, then 1 o'clock. By 2, she was genuinely concerned. It wasn't like him to miss a night without at least stopping by to explain. When he finally walked through the door at 2:30, he looked worse than she'd ever seen him. His lip was split, blood dried on his chin, and he was limping badly. Thomas, what happened? Patricia rushed around the counter, guiding him to a booth in the back, away from the few other customers. Got jumped, he said, wincing as he sat down. Couple of guys thought I had money, jokes on them. I had exactly $4. Patricia grabbed the first aid kit from behind the counter, her hands shaking with anger and concern. As she cleaned his wounds, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about serving coffee anymore. This was about a human being who deserved so much better than what life had dealt him. You can't keep living like this, she said quietly, dabbing at his split lip with antiseptic. You need help, real help. I'm trying, Thomas said, his voice breaking. I fill out applications. I go to interviews when I can clean up enough. Nothing ever comes through. It's like once you fall through the cracks, nobody wants to help you climb back out. Patricia finished bandaging a cut above his eye, her mind racing. There had to be something she could do, some way to help beyond hot coffee and leftover pie. But what? She was barely keeping her own head above water. As she sat across from him in that booth, watching him struggle to hold back tears, Patricia made a decision. She didn't know exactly what she was going to do yet, but she knew she couldn't just stand by anymore. Listen to me, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. We're going to figure this out. I don't know how yet, but we will. You're not alone in this. Not anymore. Thomas looked at her with such raw gratitude, it nearly broke her heart. Why? He asked. Why do you care so much about a stranger? Patricia thought about her answer carefully. Because someone cared about me once, when I needed it most. Because my daughter is watching how I move through this world, and I want her to see that compassion isn't conditional. And because you're not a stranger anymore, Thomas. You're my friend. That night, as Thomas left the diner, Patricia watched him disappear into the darkness with a heavy heart and a determined spirit. She didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. The following week brought an unexpected cold snap to the city, temperatures plummeting to near freezing. Patricia found herself thinking about Thomas constantly during her days, worrying about where he was sleeping, whether he was warm enough, if he was eating. She'd started keeping extra blankets in her car, just in case, along with granola bars and bottles of water. Melissa had noticed her mother's preoccupation. Mom, you're doing it again, she said one afternoon as they sat in their small apartment's living room. Patricia had been staring out the window, lost in thought. Doing what, honey? Worrying about everyone except yourself. Melissa set down her phone, giving her mother her full attention. It's that man from the diner, isn't it? Thomas? Patricia nodded slowly. He's been through so much, Mel. His wife died. He lost everything. And he's trying so hard to get back on his feet, but the system just keeps pushing him down. So help him, Melissa said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. It's not that easy, sweetheart. I can't just... Why not? Her daughter's directness caught Patricia off guard. You're always telling me that we should stand up for what's right, that we should help people when we can. So help him. Really help him. Patricia looked at her 16-year-old daughter, struck by her clarity. And how exactly do you suggest I do that? Melissa thought for a moment. Doesn't Mrs. Chen from church run that job placement program? And didn't you say Thomas used to be an accountant? Maybe she could help. It was a simple suggestion, but it sparked something in Patricia's mind. Margaret Chen did run a program helping people get back into the workforce. Patricia had volunteered there a few times, helping with resume reviews. Why hadn't she thought of that before? That night at the diner, when Thomas arrived at his usual time, Patricia had a proposal ready. "I want to help you get back on your feet," she said, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter. "Really help you? Not just with food and coffee." Thomas looked wary. "Patricia, you've already done more than—" "Hear me out," she interrupted gently. "I know someone who runs a job placement program. She specializes in helping people who've been out of work for a while. I'd like to connect you with her, if you're willing." "I don't know," Thomas said, his shoulders sagging. "I've tried so many times. The rejections, they wear you down. I know they do. But this is different. Margaret Chen, the woman who runs it, she actually cares. She doesn't just look at applications. She looks at people." Patricia leaned forward, her voice earnest. "Thomas, you have skills. You have experience. You just need someone to give you a real chance." Over the next hour, Patricia learned more about Thomas's past than she had in all their previous conversations combined. He'd been a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm, respected and well-liked. But when his wife Janet got sick, he'd taken time off to care for her. The company had been understanding at first, but as the months stretched on and Janet's condition worsened, they'd grown impatient. After she died, Thomas had tried to return to work, but the grief had been overwhelming. He'd made mistakes, missed deadlines, and eventually been let go. "I couldn't focus," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Every morning I'd wake up and forget for just a second that she was gone. Then it would hit me all over again, and I'd just fall apart." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "That's not weakness, Thomas. That's love. That's grief. That's being human." "Try telling that to potential employers," he said bitterly. "They see the gap in my resume. They see where I am now, and they make assumptions. Nobody wants to take a chance on someone who's been sleeping in shelters." "Then we don't tell them that part," Patricia said firmly. "Not right away. We get you cleaned up. We get you proper interview clothes. We use my address on applications if we need to. We do whatever it takes to get your foot in the door. And then we let your skills speak for themselves." Thomas stared at her in disbelief. "Why would you do all that for me?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Patricia replied simply, "and because I believe in you, even if you don't believe in yourself right now." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Patricia connected Thomas with Margaret Chen, who immediately saw his potential. She helped him update his resume, highlighting his years of experience and downplaying the recent gap with carefully worded explanations about family care responsibilities. Patricia took him shopping at a thrift store, helping him select professional clothes for interviews. She even convinced Harold to let Thomas use the diner's back room to shower and change before meetings. Melissa got involved too, helping Thomas practice interview questions and teaching him basic computer skills he'd need for online applications. Patricia watched with pride as her daughter showed the same compassion she'd tried to instill in her. "You're really good at this," Thomas told Melissa one afternoon as they worked together at the diner during Patricia's break. "You should think about social work or counseling." Melissa beamed. "Maybe I will. Mom always says helping people is the most important work you can do." But not everything went smoothly. Thomas landed 3 interviews in 2 weeks, and all 3 ended in rejection. Each one hit him harder than the last, and Patricia could see him starting to lose hope again. "Maybe this was a mistake," he said, one night after the 3rd rejection. "Maybe I'm kidding myself thinking I can get back to where I was." "Stop that," Patricia said sharply, surprising herself with her vehemence. "You don't get to give up. Not now. Not after all this work." "I'm tired, Patricia," Thomas said, and the exhaustion in his voice was bone deep. "I'm so tired of failing, then rest," she said, softening. "But don't quit. There's a difference." What Patricia didn't tell Thomas was that she'd been struggling too. Harold had been increasingly uncomfortable with the time she spent helping Thomas, hinting that she needed to focus more on her actual job. Her own bills were piling up, made worse by the money she'd been spending to help Thomas with clothes and supplies, and she'd started having doubts of her own. Was she helping, or was she just postponing the inevitable? One particularly difficult night, Patricia confided in her regular customer, an older woman named Dorothy, who came in every night for decaf and pie. "Am I crazy?" Patricia asked. "Investing all this time and energy in someone I barely know?" Dorothy looked at her with kind eyes. "Honey, the world is full of people who mind their own business and look the other way, but it's people like you, the ones who see someone hurting and actually do something about it, who make life bearable for the rest of us. Don't second-guess your compassion." Those words stayed with Patricia, strengthening her resolve. When Thomas came in the next night, she had news. "Margaret called me today. She has a lead on a position at Anderson accounting firm. It's entry-level, below what you used to do, but it's a foot in the door. The interview is Friday." Thomas's face lit up with cautious hope. "Really? Really? And Thomas?" Patricia reached across the counter and squeezed his hand. "This is it. I can feel it. This is your chance." The days leading up to the interview were tense. Patricia helped Thomas prepare obsessively, running through potential questions, rehearsing answers, making sure every detail was perfect. The night before the interview, he was so nervous he could barely eat the soup she'd heated up for him. "What if I mess this up?" he asked, his anxiety palpable. "You won't," Patricia said, with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "You're qualified, you're prepared, and you're ready. Just be yourself, be honest, and let them see what I see, a good man who deserves a second chance." Friday seemed to take forever to arrive. Patricia worked her shift in a fog of worry and hope, checking her phone constantly for any word from Thomas. When he finally walked through the door that night, she couldn't read his expression. "Well?" she asked breathlessly. Thomas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. Patricia's heart sank. She knew that posture, that look. Another rejection. She opened her mouth to offer words of comfort, but then Thomas looked up at her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Tears. But not tears of sadness. "I got it," he whispered. "Patricia, I got the job." The celebration at the diner that night was subdued, but heartfelt. Patricia brought out a slice of chocolate cake she'd been saving, and even Harold came out from the back to shake Thomas's hand. Melissa, who'd stopped by after school, threw her arms around him in an impulsive hug that made Thomas's eyes well up again. "I start Monday," he said, still seeming dazed by his good fortune. "It's not much. Basic bookkeeping, data entry. But Mr. Anderson said if I prove myself, there's room for advancement. He said he respected my experience and thought I deserved a chance." "See?" Patricia said, her voice thick with emotion. "I told you someone would see your worth." But even in that moment of triumph, Patricia could see the worry creeping back into Thomas's expression. "There's just one problem," he admitted. "I need business attire, more than one outfit, and I need a place to stay that's close enough to get to work on time. The shelter is across town, and the bus schedule that early in the morning is unreliable." The joy in the room deflated slightly. Patricia's mind raced, calculating numbers she knew didn't add up. She was already stretched thin financially, and while she wanted desperately to help, she simply didn't have the resources to fund an apartment deposit and work wardrobe. "We'll figure something out," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Maybe Margaret knows of some transitional housing programs, or—" "I might have an idea," Melissa interrupted, looking at her phone. "Give me until tomorrow. Let me check on something first." Patricia looked at her daughter curiously, but Melissa just smiled mysteriously and went back to texting. Thomas left that night with hope mixed with anxiety, and Patricia couldn't shake the feeling that they'd climbed one mountain only to find another waiting. The next morning, Melissa made her announcement over breakfast. "So, remember Mr. Patterson from church? The one who owns those rental properties?" Patricia nodded slowly. Robert Patterson was a successful real estate investor who'd been part of their congregation for years. He was known for being shrewd, but fair. "Well, I reached out to him last night," Melissa continued. "I explained Thomas's situation, how he just got a job, but needs a place to stay. Mr. Patterson has a small efficiency apartment above one of his buildings downtown. It's tiny and needs some work, but he said Thomas could have it for reduced rent if he's willing to do some maintenance around the property." Patricia stared at her daughter in amazement. You did that? On your own? You taught me to help people, Mom. I was just following your example, Melissa grinned. Plus, I may have mentioned that Thomas is an honest, hard-working man who's gotten a raw deal, and that my mom has been vouching for him for months. Mr. Patterson said anyone you believe in that strongly is worth taking a chance on. Patricia felt tears spring to her eyes. When did you grow up so much? That afternoon, they met Thomas at the diner and shared the news. His reaction was overwhelming. He actually broke down crying, something Patricia had never seen him do despite all his hardships. I don't know how to thank you both, he said, wiping his eyes. You've given me my life back. The following week was a blur of activity. Patricia helped Thomas move into the efficiency apartment, which was indeed small but clean and safe. Church members donated furniture and household items. Margaret's organization provided him with additional work clothes from their professional wardrobe program. By Sunday night, Thomas had a home, a job starting the next morning, and a support system he'd never expected to find. Monday evening, Patricia waited anxiously for Thomas to come by the diner after his first day of work. When he walked in at 7 o'clock, earlier than his usual midnight visits, he was wearing a button-down shirt and slacks, and there was a lightness to his step she'd never seen before. How did it go? She asked eagerly. It was incredible, Thomas said. And for the first time since she'd met him, he actually looked happy. Everyone was welcoming, the work was engaging, and Patricia, I felt like myself again, like the person I used to be before everything fell apart. Over coffee and pie, Thomas shared details of his day, the accounts he'd been assigned, the co-workers who'd introduced themselves, the small victories of remembering skills he thought he'd lost. Patricia listened with genuine joy, proud beyond words of how far he'd come. I got my first paycheck advance today, Thomas said, reaching into his pocket. It's not much, but I wanted to pay you back for everything you've done. He slid several bills across the counter. Patricia pushed them back firmly. Absolutely not. You need every penny to get properly established. Save your money, Thomas. But I owe you so much. You don't owe me anything. Patricia interrupted gently. That's not why I helped you. Just promise me that someday, when you're back on your feet and doing well, you'll help someone else who needs it. That's payment enough. Thomas nodded, his eyes bright with emotion. I promise. The next few weeks settled into a new rhythm. Thomas would stop by the diner after work, updating Patricia on his progress. He was thriving at Anderson Accounting, exceeding expectations, and earning praise from Mr. Anderson himself. His efficiency apartment became a real home, decorated with second-hand finds and filled with a warmth it had probably never known. He even adopted a cat from the local shelter, a scraggly orange tabby he named Lucky. Patricia watched his transformation with deep satisfaction, but she also noticed something else developing, something she hadn't anticipated. Thomas had started looking at her differently, with an affection that went beyond gratitude, and if she was honest with herself, she'd started looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that had nothing to do with checking on his progress. One evening in late January, nearly 4 months after their first meeting, Thomas came to the diner with an unusual request. Would you have dinner with me? He asked. Not here, I mean. A real dinner, at a real restaurant, as a thank you. Patricia hesitated. She'd been so focused on helping Thomas rebuild his life that she hadn't considered the possibility of anything more between them. Thomas, you don't need to thank me. It's not just thanks, he said quietly. Patricia, these past months, getting to know you, seeing your kindness and strength, you've become important to me. More important than I probably should admit. Before Patricia could respond, Harold appeared from the back room. Patricia, can I see you for a minute? The interruption broke the moment, and Thomas quickly excused himself, saying he'd talk to her later. Patricia followed Harold to his office, her mind still reeling from Thomas's confession. We need to talk, Harold said, his expression serious. I've been getting complaints again. Some customers are saying you're playing favorites, that you're spending too much time with that homeless guy. He's not homeless anymore, Patricia said sharply. He has a job, an apartment. I know. And I'm happy for him, really. But Patricia, you need to maintain some professional boundaries. This is a workplace, not a social club, Harold sighed. Look, you're a great employee, and your heart's in the right place. But I need you focused on all the customers, not just one. Patricia left Harold's office feeling shaken. Was he right? Had she crossed a line somewhere? She'd been so caught up in helping Thomas that she hadn't stopped to consider how it looked to others, or what her own feelings were becoming. That night, as her shift ended, Patricia found an envelope tucked under the windshield wiper of her car. Inside was a handwritten note from Thomas. "I'm sorry if I made things awkward earlier. You've done so much for me, and the last thing I want is to complicate your life or make you uncomfortable. I'll understand if you need some distance. But I want you to know that meeting you changed everything for me. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Whatever happens next, I'll be grateful to you for the rest of my life. Thomas." Patricia sat in her car, reading the note over and over, her emotions in turmoil. She'd helped Thomas to be kind, to make a difference, to teach her daughter about compassion. But somewhere along the way, her feelings had deepened into something more complicated, something that scared her. She thought about her ex-husband, about the betrayal and pain that had left her cautious about opening her heart again. She thought about the risk of getting involved with someone who was still rebuilding his life, still healing from his own losses. She thought about what people would say, the judgments they might make. But she also thought about Thomas's smile, the way he'd transformed from a broken man into someone full of hope and purpose. She thought about the conversations they'd shared, the connection they'd formed. She thought about how he looked at her, with a warmth and appreciation that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. The next evening, Thomas didn't come to the diner, or the evening after that. By the third night, Patricia was worried enough to call him, but he didn't answer. She texted Melissa, asking if she'd heard from him, but her daughter hadn't either. On the fourth night, Thomas finally appeared, but something was wrong. He looked agitated, upset, and when he sat down at the counter, he avoided meeting her eyes. "Thomas, what's going on?" Patricia asked, her concern overriding her confusion. "Are you okay? Is it the job?" "The job's fine," he said quietly. "Better than fine, actually. Mr. Anderson offered me a promotion today. More responsibility, better pay." "That's wonderful," Patricia exclaimed. "So why do you look like someone died?" Thomas finally met her gaze, and what she saw in his eyes made her heart skip a beat. It wasn't sadness or grief. It was fear, mixed with determination. The look of someone about to do something terrifying but necessary. "Patricia," he said slowly, "there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you months ago, but I was afraid you'd judge me, afraid you'd stop helping me, afraid of a lot of things." He took a deep breath. "But I can't move forward with my life. Can't even think about what might happen between us until I'm completely honest with you." Patricia felt a chill run down her spine. "What is it?" Thomas's hands shook as he wrapped them around his coffee cup. "The night we met, when I first came into this diner, I wasn't just some random homeless man seeking shelter from the rain. I came here specifically looking for you." Patricia felt the blood drain from her face. "What do you mean you were looking for me?" Thomas set down his coffee cup, his hands still trembling. 23 years ago, I was working my first accounting job, fresh out of college. I was young, stupid, and desperate to prove myself. My supervisor, a man named Richard Morgan, was embezzling from the company, small amounts at first, then larger sums. He got sloppy, and I discovered what he was doing. Patricia's breath caught. Morgan. Her maiden name. Her father's name. Richard begged me not to report him. Thomas continued, his voice thick with emotion. He told me he had a wife and a baby daughter, that his family would be destroyed if this came out. He promised to pay everything back, to never do it again. I was 22 years old, and I believed him. He looked directly at Patricia now. I didn't report him. I helped him cover it up, helped him fix the books, and for 3 years, I thought I'd done the right thing, that I'd saved a family. Patricia's mind reeled. Her father, the man who'd left when she was 7, who her mother never talked about except to say he'd made bad choices and broken their family. Pieces of her childhood suddenly clicked into place. The sudden move, her mother's bitterness, the way relatives whispered and stopped talking when she entered rooms. Then the company did a major audit. Thomas went on, his eyes glistening. Everything came out. The embezzlement, the cover-up, all of it. Richard went to prison. But because I'd helped hide it, because I'd falsified records to protect him, I lost my accounting license. I was banned from the profession for 5 years. My career was over before it really started. Why are you telling me this? Patricia whispered, though part of her already knew. Because when Richard got out of prison, he found me, tracked me down, and thanked me for trying to protect his family. He told me his daughter was grown now, that his wife had divorced him, but his little girl had turned out wonderful despite everything. He showed me a picture. Thomas pulled out his wallet, extracting a worn photograph. It was you, Patricia, at your college graduation. He was so proud of you, even though he'd lost the right to be part of your life. Patricia stared at the photo, recognizing it immediately. Her mother had sent copies to relatives. How her father had gotten one, she'd never know. Richard died 6 years ago, Thomas continued. Heart attack. Before he passed, he made me promise something. He said if I ever had the chance, if our paths ever crossed, I should look after his daughter, make sure she was okay. He knew he'd failed you, failed your mother, and he wanted someone to be there for you if you ever needed it. So all of this, Patricia's voice broke. The coffee, the conversations, letting me help you. It was all because of some deathbed promise to my father? No, Thomas said vehemently, reaching across the counter before pulling his hand back. That's not... Patricia, please listen. When I lost everything, when Janet died and my life fell apart, I wasn't thinking about Richard's promise. I was just trying to survive each day. That first night I came in here, I was at my lowest point. I'd been walking for hours in the rain, seriously considering whether it was worth going on at all. Patricia felt tears streaming down her face. Then why? I came in here by chance, looking for shelter from the storm. But when you introduced yourself, when you said your name was Patricia Morgan, something clicked. I remembered Richard's promise, and for the first time in months, I felt like maybe there was a reason I was still here. Like maybe I could do one good thing to make up for all the mistakes I'd made. Thomas's voice cracked. But Patricia, everything that happened after that first night, that was real. Your kindness, your compassion, the way you saw me as a person when everyone else looked right through me, that had nothing to do with Richard. That was all you. You should have told me, Patricia said, wiping her eyes. From the beginning, you should have told me who you were, what you knew about my father. I know. And I'm sorry. I was afraid you'd push me away, that you'd hate me for being connected to the man who destroyed your family. Thomas stood up, preparing to leave. I understand if you can't forgive this. I just couldn't move forward without being honest. You deserve the truth. Patricia watched him turn toward the door, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, confusion, betrayal, but also something else. Understanding. Because hadn't she also kept secrets? Hadn't she also been shaped by her father's failures, by the weight of shame and broken promises? Thomas. Wait. He stopped but didn't turn around. My father's choices weren't your responsibility, Patricia said slowly, working through her thoughts as she spoke. You were barely more than a kid yourself, trying to do what you thought was right. And yes, you should have told me the truth sooner. But everything you said is right. What happened between us, the friendship we built, the way we helped each other, that was real. Thomas turned around, hope and fear warring in his expression. I'm not going to lie and say this doesn't complicate things, Patricia continued. I need time to process all of this. But Thomas, you came into that diner broken and hopeless, and you found the strength to rebuild your entire life. You kept showing up, kept trying, even when everything seemed impossible. That's the man I got to know. That's who you really are. So what happens now? Thomas asked quietly. Patricia thought about her father, about the choices he'd made and the consequences that had rippled through her life. She thought about second chances and redemption, about how people were more than their worst mistakes. She thought about what she wanted to teach Melissa about forgiveness and compassion. Now you give me some time, she said. And then, maybe, we figure out what comes next, together. 3 weeks passed before Patricia called Thomas. They met at a small coffee shop, neutral territory where they could talk without the weight of the diner's history hanging over them. Patricia had spent those weeks thinking, talking with Melissa, even visiting her mother to ask questions about her father she'd never dared ask before. I was so angry at him for so long, Patricia told Thomas as they sat across from each other. Angry that he left, that he made choices that hurt us, that he was never there when I needed him. But I'm 42 years old now, and I understand better how complicated people are, how good people can make terrible mistakes. He talked about you all the time, Thomas said softly, in those last months before he died. He knew he couldn't be part of your life. Knew he'd lost that right, but he never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping you were happy. Patricia felt tears well up, but this time they weren't tears of anger. They were tears of grief for the father she'd lost twice, once to his choices, and once to death, before she could decide whether to forgive him. "I'm not ready for anything romantic," she said honestly. "Not yet. There's too much to process, too many complicated feelings. But I don't want to lose what we have, Thomas. Your friendship means something to me." "Your friendship means everything to me," Thomas replied. "And I can wait. For however long it takes." 6 months later, Patricia stood in Thomas's efficiency apartment, now transformed into a cozy home filled with books and plants and photos. Lucky the cat wound around her ankles as she helped Thomas pack. He'd gotten another promotion at Anderson Accounting. This one significant enough that he could afford a proper one-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood. "Can you believe how much has changed?" Thomas asked, carefully wrapping a framed photo of him, Patricia, and Melissa from Christmas dinner. "A year ago, I was sleeping in shelters. Now I have a career again, a real home, people who care about me." "You did this," Patricia reminded him. "You put in the work, you showed up every day, you rebuilt your life. I just gave you a cup of coffee and believed in you." "You gave me so much more than that," Thomas said seriously. "You gave me hope when I had none. You saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. You reminded me that I was still worth something." Melissa burst through the door, carrying boxes. "Mom, the moving truck is here. Mr. Patterson wants to know if Thomas is taking the furniture or— Oh, hey, are you guys having a moment? Should I leave?" Patricia laughed, wiping her eyes. "No, sweetie. Come help us pack." As they worked together, filling boxes and reminiscing about the journey that had brought them all together, Patricia felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She thought about her father, about the promise Thomas had made, about how strangely life worked sometimes. Her father's mistakes had led to Thomas's struggles, which had eventually brought them together, which had taught both of them about forgiveness and second chances. 2 weeks after Thomas moved into his new apartment, he invited Patricia to dinner, not at a fancy restaurant, but at his place, where he'd cooked dinner himself. It was simple, pasta and salad. But the effort and care he'd put into it was evident in every detail. "I've been thinking about what you said," Thomas began as they ate. "About needing time to process everything, about not being ready for anything romantic. And I want you to know that I respect that completely, but I also need you to know that I'm in love with you, Patricia. I think I have been for months now." Patricia's breath caught, but she didn't interrupt. "I love the way you see people, really see them. I love your strength and your kindness. I love how you raised Melissa to be compassionate and brave. I love how you never gave up on me, even when giving up would have been easier." Thomas reached across the table, his hand open in invitation, but not demanding. "I know our story is complicated. I know we started in an unusual way, but I truly believe we were meant to find each other." Patricia looked at this man who had entered her life as a stranger in need, and had become so much more. She thought about all the reasons she should be cautious, all the ways this could be complicated, but she also thought about the connection they'd forged, the way he made her laugh, the way he'd shown her that taking risks on people was worth it. "I love you too," she said quietly, placing her hand in his. "I think I've known it for a while now, but I was scared of getting hurt again, scared of what people would think, scared of a lot of things. But you know what? I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions." Thomas's face lit up with a joy so pure it took her breath away. Yeah, Patricia confirmed, squeezing his hand. "Our story might have started in an unusual way, but maybe that's what makes it special. You came into that diner looking for me because of a promise to my father, but you stayed because of who we are together, and that's what matters." They talked late into the night, making plans and sharing dreams. Thomas told her about his hopes for the future at Anderson Accounting, how Mr. Anderson was mentoring him for a senior position. Patricia shared her own dreams, of maybe going back to school, of starting a nonprofit to help people experiencing homelessness, of showing others the same compassion she'd shown Thomas. "We should do it together," Thomas suggested. "Start that nonprofit. I can handle the financial side. You can handle the outreach and programming. We could call it second chances. Or new beginnings, Patricia countered. Or the coffee cup project, Thomas said with a grin. Since it all started with a cup of coffee. They laughed together, and in that moment, Patricia understood something profound. Her father's failures had been real, and the pain they'd caused had been real too. But from those failures had come unexpected grace. A chance for Thomas to keep a promise and find redemption. A chance for Patricia to practice the compassion she'd always preached. A chance for both of them to discover love in the most unlikely of circumstances. A year later, Patricia stood in the community center where the Second Chances Project had just opened its doors. The nonprofit she and Thomas had founded together was already helping dozens of people get back on their feet, providing not just resources, but genuine human connection. Melissa, now in her first year of college studying social work, volunteered there every weekend. Thomas walked up behind Patricia, wrapping his arms around her waist as they surveyed the bustling room full of volunteers, clients, and supporters. "We did it," he murmured into her hair. "We did," Patricia agreed, leaning back into his embrace. On the wall hung a framed photograph from that first night. Thomas sitting at the diner counter, Patricia pouring him coffee. Neither of them had known someone was taking pictures for the diner's social media page, but Melissa had tracked it down and had it printed. Below it was a quote Thomas had suggested. "Sometimes the person you help is helping you just as much." Patricia thought about that night, about the man who'd walked through the door seeking shelter, and how neither of them had known how profoundly their lives were about to change. She thought about her father and the complicated legacy he'd left behind. How something good had ultimately grown from his mistakes. She thought about all the people they were helping now, all the second chances they were giving, all the cups of coffee and kind words that were changing lives. "I have something for you," Thomas said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Patricia turned to face him, her heart racing as he dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the community center. Around them, conversations stopped. People turned to watch, and Melissa appeared from nowhere with her phone ready to capture the moment. "Patricia Morgan, you saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You gave me hope, purpose, and love when I had nothing. You showed me that people are worth fighting for, worth believing in, worth taking chances on. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of the faith you placed in me. Will you marry me?" Through tears of joy, Patricia looked at this man who had come into her life on a rainy night, carrying secrets and broken dreams. She thought about how far they'd both come, how much they'd healed together, how love had found them in the most unexpected way. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet and into her arms as the community center erupted in applause. 1,000 times yes. As they kissed, surrounded by the people whose lives they were changing and who were changing theirs in return, Patricia understood that this was what second chances looked like. Not perfect, not without complications, but real and honest and full of hope. Her father's promise had brought Thomas to her door, but their own courage, compassion, and willingness to see each other truly had created something beautiful. That night, as they sat in what had become their booth at Miller's Diner, celebrating with Melissa and their closest friends, Patricia raised her coffee cup in a toast. "To second chances," she said. "To new beginnings," Thomas added. "To love found in unexpected places," Melissa chimed in. And as they clinked their cups together, Patricia sent a silent thank you to the father she'd never fully known, whose mistakes and redemption had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this life she'd never imagined, but couldn't imagine living without. The door to the diner chimed, and a young man walked in, soaked from the rain, looking lost and desperate. Patricia caught Thomas's eye, and they both smiled, knowing. Without a word, Patricia stood and walked to the counter, grabbing a fresh cup in the coffee pot. "Coffee," she asked gently, and in that simple word was contained everything she'd learned about compassion, hope, and the profound impact of seeing another person's humanity. The cycle of kindness continued, rippling outward in ways they'd never fully know, touching lives they'd never meet, creating second chances for people who needed them most. And it had all started with a cup of coffee on a rainy night, offered by a woman who believed that everyone deserved to be seen, to be helped, to be given hope. That was their story. That was their beginning. And now, it was their forever.